10 Get off the Fingdock veteran! You don't own the damn ocean, a tech mogul screamed. The next morning, 6 Navy destroyers showed up in silence. Part 1. I told you already. Get the hell off the dock, you filthy old man. Get off the Fingdock veteran. You don't own the damn ocean. That's what the billionaire screamed right before his yacht crushed the last thing holding a 74-year-old man together. Would you have stepped in pause for a second? Imagine watching a proud veteran standing alone on a foggy dock, hands trembling as his wooden boat, a boat he built himself with his bare hands after Vietnam was torn apart, while strangers laughed, filmed, and said nothing. This isn't just a story. This is a reckoning. Comment below. What would you have done? Port Camden, Maine, 5:42 a.m. The fog sat heavy on the harbor, thick as milk, muffling the sound of morning gulls. William Eugene Ashford, 74, stepped onto the dock like he did every morning for the past 46 years. Same gait, same thermos of black coffee, same quiet salute to the rising flag on his boat, the Harlan Jane. It wasn't much to look at. The varnish had peeled away, the hull carried salt scars and time. But it was sturdy, steady. Like him, that boat had saved his life twice. Once from drowning in 1969 when a torpedo struck his destroyer in the South China Sea, and again years later when PTSD threatened to drown him from within. He built it himself. Every plank, every nail, every knot was a rhythm that kept the demons quiet. His late wife named it the Harlan Jane after her favorite gospel hymn. But that morning something was wrong. He heard it before he saw it, the thrum of engines far too powerful for a quiet harbor. Then out of the mist she emerged, Aurora. 3 decks, Italian white, 600 tons of arrogance. And at the helm, Chase Hargrove, 41 tech billionaire. Owner of the new Portside Vista Resort, featured on the cover of Forbes Next Gen. A man who'd never heard of quiet or earned his salt on the sea. William waved his arms calmly, not aggressively, just enough to say, "I'm here." But on the top deck, champagne flutes clinked and laughter rose. They didn't slow. He called out, "Hey, I'm moored here. Watch your approach." No response, just music and power. Then a voice, clear cold, amplified by ego and money. "Get off the Fingdock, veteran. You don't own the damn ocean." Some guests laughed, others filmed. The yacht didn't stop, didn't swerve. The sound of fiberglass crushing old oak echoed like a bone snapping. The Harlan Jane cracked under the weight, her stern split open wood splintering into the sea. William tried to leap back, but his knee, blown out decades ago in service, gave way. He fell scraping his shoulder against the dock. Above him the yacht sailed on, leaving behind only shattered pieces and a man gasping in silence. The American flag, the one William raised every morning, was torn from its pole and drifted into the water, its red stripes bleeding into the foam. Harbor security stood by, frozen. One even pulled out his phone. Someone muttered, "Old man shouldn't have been there anyway." Another laughed. That boat was a floating coffin. William got up slowly, shaking. Not from injury, from something deeper. He limped to the edge, eyes locked on the torn flag floating like a fallen soldier. He reached down, joints aching, and pulled it out with both hands. He clutched it to his chest, soaking wet, not saying a word, not shedding a tear. People stared, some uncomfortable. A few turned away. No one helped. Up on the yacht, Chase Hargrove raised his glass and said, "Maybe it's time to let the past go, old-timer. Everything expires eventually." No police came, no citation was given, no apology offered. William just stood there, a silhouette against the grey harbor light, soaked in salt and shame. The video was uploaded within the hour. The title read, "Old Man Cries Over Trash Boat, LOL." It went viral before lunchtime. People commented, "Boomer meltdown, should have had insurance. Why was he even out there?" Why do these old guys think the world owes them something? By sunset, the Harlan Jane was gone, towed out, deemed a hazard. The dock was hosed clean. The harbor returned to business as usual. But that night, in a small cottage on the edge of the bluff, William opened an old drawer. Inside, dog tags, letters yellowed with age, a folded flag still crisp. He didn't eat dinner. He sat at the kitchen table and wrote in a weather-stained logbook, day 16, 8 to 25. First day without Harlan Jane. The sea didn't call today. Cliffhanger ending of part 1. The next morning, a notification pinged on someone's phone at the Navy alumni office in Annapolis. The subject line is "This Who I Think It Is." Attached the viral video, a still frame of William Eugene Ashford soaked holding his flag. Within 15 minutes, someone picked up the phone. "Admiral Denton, sir, you need to see this." Part 2. You don't have any rights here, sir. We've reviewed the footage and you're at fault. Hukmodo Kuksok. At Kiswekun PM, the Port Authority denied William's insurance claim without a single apology. They didn't just destroy his boat. Now they told him he was the one to blame. Let that sink in. The man who stood quietly as his vessel, his only home, was splintered by a millionaire's yacht who salvaged a soaked American flag with shaking hands and said nothing, was now told he had no case, no rights, and no claim. Tell us in the comments, should he have fought back? By 10:03 a.m. the next morning, William Eugene Ashford sat quietly outside the Port Camden Harbor Authority office. The folding chair creaked beneath his weight. His shoulder, still sore from the fall, ached with every breath, but he didn't flinch. He wore his old Navy windbreaker, faded but still intact, like him. Inside, a junior claims adjuster scrolled through the footage. Chase Hargrove's yacht Aurora clearly approached too fast. No audio, just the visual impact. The broken stern, the torn flag, the man limping. Then came the verdict. "Mr. Ashford," the man said without lifting his eyes, "we've completed our internal review. Based on the footage, your vessel lacked the required reflective tape, had no radar beacon, and failed to meet current maritime standards. We've marked this as owner negligence. There will be no compensation." William blinked slowly. "Negligence?" "Correct. Your boat was outdated, sir." "Outdated," he repeated, voice low. "She passed inspection 18 months ago. We're following updated federal guidelines. Post-2023 revisions, I'm sorry, but you don't have any rights here, sir. No emotion, no empathy, just procedural dismissal." He didn't yell, didn't curse, just stood, nodded, and left. Outside, the wind cut sharper than usual. He passed the harbor, now filled with polished fiberglass hulls and Bluetooth speakers blaring morning playlists. The Harlan Jane was gone, just an empty slip, still damp. At home, he sat at the table, looked out toward the water where she once rested. The flag he rescued now lay drying across a towel rack. His hands moved instinctively, reaching for a pencil. He flipped to the next blank page in his old ship's logbook and wrote, "Day 16, 826. Denied. Forgotten. Invisible." Then he turned off the radio. The silence hurt less than the headlines. But in Washington, D.C., the silence was breaking. Angela, Ashford Williams' daughter, had been watching the viral video on loop in her VA hospital break room. Her fellow nurses had whispered gawked. But Angela, she knew that stance, that silence. She had seen that same look in her father's eyes the day he buried his best friend from the USS Ramsey. She closed the laptop, logged into the Navy alumni portal, typed, "Does anyone remember Master Chief William E. Ashford, South China Sea, 1972, USS Colfax." Then she uploaded the video. That same afternoon, retired Rear Admiral Vincent Keller nearly dropped his cup of black coffee when the message hit his inbox. The name hit him like a wave. Ashford. The sailor who manually sealed a flooded weapons bay during an engine fire, saving 18 crewmen. who refused the Navy Cross, saying, "Just honor the boys we lost." Keller hadn't seen or heard from him in over 4 decades. Now he was watching him collapse on a dock drenched in humiliation while influencers laughed. Meanwhile, back in Port Camden, William tried to get back to routine. He cleaned the shed behind his cottage, swept the workshop where the Harlan Jane was born. Every corner held memories, paint-chipped blueprints, bent nails still sticky with old resin. He tried fishing from the pier, but his lines tangled. His hands weren't used to the smaller rods. By noon, he gave up. Locals passed by without looking. One tourist snapped a selfie with the empty slip and posted, "Boomer's boat got totaled. Harbor looks cleaner now." That evening, Maggie came over. "I contacted the VA," she said. "I already tried. They're not helping." "I know." Her voice cracked. "Why aren't you angry?" He didn't answer. Instead, he handed her the logbook. She flipped through it, date after date, weather reports, fish counts, short notes about seabirds and morning fog, until she reached the most recent page. She read it aloud, trembling. "The sea didn't call today." She put the book down. "I'm not letting this end here." Cut to Washington again. Rear Admiral Keller picked up the phone. "Captain Ortega," he said, "put me through to Command Group 6. Tell them I'm pulling in a favor." "What's the occasion?" Sir Keller looked back at the still frame from the viral video, William soaked, clutching the flag. "A forgotten sailor just got stepped on, and I refuse to let silence be his legacy." Back in Maine, a strange vehicle pulled into William's driveway at 7:03 p.m. A black SUV, unmarked, official. The man who stepped out wore civilian clothes but had the bearing of command. William noticed the crew cut, the rigid spine, the careful respect in the man's approach. He handed William a sealed envelope. Inside, to Master Chief William E. Ashford, subject honor notification. Naval Protocol 614 from Office of the Chief of Naval Operations. No explanation, just a date, a time. Port Camden. 600 hours. 2 days from now. William looked up. The man saluted. "We remember, sir," and then he left. Cliffhanger ending of part 2. That night, Angela checked her father's logbook one more time. A new entry was written at the bottom of the page. Day 16, 8:27. The sea called again. "I think I'll answer." If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started because some veterans don't raise their voices, but the sea remembers them anyway. Part 3. Everyone stop. Be quiet. There's something moving into the harbor. Hukmodo. Kuksok. It began with one low foghorn, then 5 more, and the whole town froze. What would make an entire coastal town go silent? No sirens, no speeches, just the weight of something sacred approaching through the fog. Tell us below, how would you react if 6 warships showed up in your harbor? Without saying a word, Port Camden hadn't heard a naval horn in decades. So when the first low blast echoed through the morning mist at 5:58 a.m., most locals assumed it was a glitch or some freighter off course. But when the second, then third, then sixth came in measured rhythm, the air itself changed. It wasn't just the sound, it was the intention behind it. From his porch, William Eugene Ashford stood motionless, coffee cooling in his hand. He hadn't touched his uniform in over 30 years. But today he wore the jacket, pressed, decorated, unspoken history sewn into every ribbon. He stepped off the porch, slowly, deliberately, like a man preparing to report for duty. The town watched him descend the bluff like a ghost returning to the place where it all began. By the time he reached the dock, the fog was shifting, peeling back to reveal 6 grey silhouettes cutting through the harbor water with brutal precision. Destroyers, real Navy steel, flying flags at half-mast. The townspeople lined up along the boardwalk. Shopkeepers left signs flipped to closed. Parents hushed their children. Even the yacht owners, those who'd laughed and live-streamed his humiliation, stood with lowered heads, confused, uncertain. A voice broke the stillness. From the lead vessel, a single figure stepped forward. White gloves, white uniform, medals gleaming beneath the grey sky. Rear Admiral Vincent Keller. He raised his hand in a crisp salute and called out across the water, "Master Chief William Eugene Ashford, permission to come ashore and render honors." The silence broke not with applause, but with breath held. William straightened his back, raised his hand in return, palm steady. "Permission granted, Admiral." What followed was unlike anything Port Camden had ever seen. A full-color guard marched onto the dock, each step in perfect rhythm. Behind them, hundreds of uniformed sailors lined the decks of all 6 ships, standing at attention, saluting in unison. The Admiral stepped onto the pier and addressed not just William but the town. In 1972, during an engine fire on the USS Colfax, one sailor crawled through a sealed weapons bay and manually diverted coolant flow to prevent a catastrophic detonation. He sustained third-degree burns, saved 18 crewmen, refused the Navy Cross, asked only for the names of the dead to be etched in brass. That sailor was William Eugene Ashford. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped their phone. A teenager murmured, "Is this real?" Keller continued, "2 days ago, this man's boat, his only surviving refuge, was destroyed in this harbor. No help was offered, no apology given. A flag he served under was allowed to sink." He stepped forward, removing a folded American flag from a ceremonial case. "On behalf of the United States Navy, we return it, dry, honored, remembered." He placed the flag in William's hands. William didn't cry, but something in his face cracked. Not weakness, release. A long, heavy silence settled. And then someone clapped, just one, then another, until the whole dock was wrapped in a thunderous standing ovation. But not everyone stood. On his luxury yacht, Chase Hargrove watched the ceremony unfold with a pale face. His champagne was untouched. His influencer guests had disappeared. He was alone now and on every screen across the country. The video of the Navy salute had gone viral faster than the original mockery. Now, instead of "Old Man Cries Over Trash Boat," the new title read "America Remembers Veteran." Honored by 6 warships, views 8.2 million and climbing. Comments poured in, "We failed this man, and he still stood tall. This is what a real hero looks like. Shame on everyone who laughed. My grandfather served. I'm crying watching this." Sponsors began pulling ads from Hargrove's resort. His own board issued a public statement of disapproval. One Navy veteran influencer made a 3-minute clip comparing Hargrove's outburst to spitting on a soldier's grave, and it landed. Back at the dock, Admiral Keller spoke softly to William. "We'll be anchoring for the day. A memorial will be held at 1500 hours. You're the guest of honor." William looked out over the harbor, once a place of peace, then shame, now reclaimed. "I didn't ask for this," he murmured. "You didn't have to," Keller replied. But someone finally listened. Later that day, a Navy choir performed "Eternal Father Strong to Save." As the sun broke through the clouds, William stood beside the Admiral, watching as a wreath was laid in the water where the Harlan Jane once floated. The flag he'd salvaged now flew clean, restored at the dock where he had once stood soaked in silence. Cliffhanger ending of Part 3. As the ships began to depart, a stranger approached from the crowd. Angela. She wrapped her arms around her father, whispered, "They know now. But what do you want next?" Dad William stared out at the open water. He didn't answer, but in his eyes something had shifted. Not just healing, purpose. If this scene gave you chills, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell. Because in Part 4, the man who tore William's life apart will come back not to fight, but to ask for forgiveness. And you won't believe what William asks for in return. Part 4. Money Won't Rebuild a Soul. Hook Modo, Cook Sock. Chase stood alone at the dock. No yacht, no sunglasses, no entourage, just shame. What does a billionaire look like when no one's watching, no followers, no curated smiles, no champagne, just regret, just guilt? Drop a comment. Should William forgive him or turn his back? The morning after the Navy ships departed, Port Camden felt different. Flags stayed up longer, conversations got quieter, people nodded respectfully when they passed William Eugene Ashford on the street, not out of pity, but something else. Reverence, accountability, maybe even gratitude. But not everyone had found peace. That afternoon, as the harbor sat in still recovery from yesterday's historic ceremony, a lone black SUV pulled into the gravel lot beside the pier. Out stepped Chase Hargrove. No camera crew, no lawyers, just a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled, and hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting. His eyes scanned the dock, searching for the man he publicly humiliated. He found him sitting on the same bench the Navy had installed the day before. Sit. Remember. Thank. The bronze letters gleamed in the late light. William didn't move. Just looked out to sea, posture straight back, still strong, even if time had weathered the rest of him. Chase approached slowly. Mr. Ashford, he began. William didn't turn. You've already done enough, son. I know. I needed to say it face to face. The silence pressed between them like tide water. Chase sat down beside him, but not too close. He held an envelope in both hands, offering it like a confession. It's a blank check, he said. Write whatever number makes this right. The boat, the insult, all of it. William finally turned. His eyes were steel, but not angry, disappointed, deeper than anger. He looked at the envelope, then back at the sea, and then said simply, money won't rebuild a soul. Chase blinked, caught off guard. He hadn't expected that. His voice cracked slightly. Then, what will William stood, slowly, his knees stiff, joints creaking like the deck of an old ship. He pointed toward the east pier, quiet, unoccupied, where the sun rose across the horizon each morning. There's a spot over there, he said, faces the sunrise. I want a bench, solid wood, carved. Chase squinted. What do you want on it? William didn't hesitate. 3 words, just 3. Sit. Remember, thank. Chase looked down, shoulders sinking. That's all, that's everything. 3 days later, Chase returned. This time with sleeves rolled even higher, sweat on his brow, and a carpenter in tow, a retired Navy CB named Rick Torres, who refused payment after hearing the story. Together they installed the bench exactly where William asked. Teak wood, hand-polished, bronze lettering. People watched from a distance. Some took photos. Others just stood in quiet awe like they were witnessing something sacred. When the final bolt was secured, Chase stepped back, rubbing sawdust off his palms. For the first time in his life, his hands felt useful. Thank you, he said quietly. William nodded but didn't speak, because sometimes the loudest words are the ones unspoken. Meanwhile, Angela Ashford, William's daughter, was in contact with the nationwide Veterans Support Network. The response was overwhelming. We need to tell this story to young people. He should be teaching. Let's get him into schools, maritime centers, anywhere kids can hear what service really looks like. That week, William received a visit from Rear Admiral Keller, this time in civilian clothes. They shared coffee and silence, 2 old sailors who didn't need to speak to understand each other. There's a youth maritime program, Keller said. Navy's supporting it. Seamanship, navigation, environmental stewardship. They need instructors. Real ones, not just sailors. Storytellers. You'd have part-time hours, full flexibility. You interested? William sipped his coffee. The steam rose between them. I thought I was done, he said. But maybe I'm just shifting course. Keller smiled. That's what good sailors do. News of William's bench spread across national media. Headlines read, Veteran declines fortune requests, memorial bench instead. 3 words that changed a town. Morning shows invited him on air. He politely declined. But when one anchor asked what he hoped people would take away from it all, William wrote a single sentence on a napkin and had Angela read it aloud. Don't wait until someone's gone to say they mattered. The bench became a pilgrimage site. Teenagers who once mocked him now sat and listened as William taught them to tie sailor knots, read the stars, and treat silence like sacred ground. A little boy named Benji, who once asked if old boats were useless, now sat cross-legged on the dock practicing bowlines like his life depended on it. Fathers brought sons. Veterans brought flags. Strangers brought stories. And then the most unexpected moment of all. 1 week after installing the bench, Chase Hargrove returned with a blueprint rolled under his arm. This town thinks I'm a villain, he said, and maybe I was. But I'd like to build something real now. He unrolled the design, a modest maritime learning center. Free classes, dockside access, veteran-led instruction. Funded entirely from his pocket but named after someone else, the Ashford Dockhouse. William didn't say anything for a long time, then finally asked, You building this because you feel guilty? Chase shook his head. I'm building it because you taught me the difference between pride and honor. Cliffhanger ending of Part 4. That evening, as the sky blazed with oranges and reds, a new vessel pulled into the harbor. Smaller than the Aurora, simpler than the Harlan Jane, but handcrafted, gleaming, painted on its hull Harlan's spirit, built from honor. William stood at the dock stunned. Angela Benji, Rick the carpenter, and 5 other Navy veterans stepped off the boat grinning. We built it from your original plans, Angela said. Your boat may be gone, Dad, but her soul still floats. If that moment touched your heart, hit subscribe, because in Part 5 we sail again. And William's final lesson will remind the whole world that service never expires. Part 5. You are living proof that honor never expires. Hukmodo kukmaingzao kamsuk. At sunset, William sat on the bench he never asked for, beneath a flag he never stopped saluting. Would you have stayed silent if your whole life was erased in one moment? Share in the comments. What does honor mean to you after everything? The harbor was glowing gold when William Eugene Ashford stepped onto the deck of Harlan's Spirit for the first time. His steps were slower now, but steady, like the sea had been waiting for him. The boat swayed gently, but his body remembered how to move with it. His fingers brushed the polished wood, feeling every grain like a heartbeat. At the bow, a new American flag waved proudly, stitched by the veterans who built her. It wasn't a replacement. It was a continuation. Angela stood beside him, watching her father silently reconnect with the only place that had ever felt like home. It's not the same, she whispered. William turned to her and smiled, eyes misted. No, he said, it's better, because now it doesn't carry just my story. It carries all of theirs too. In the days that followed, Port Camden transformed. What was once a vacation town with overpriced wine bars and indifferent passers-by had become something deeper, a place of memory, of community, of reverence. Children now pointed at the bench with its 3 words, sit, remember, thank. Asking questions their parents once avoided, local fishermen began leaving fresh catches outside William's door. Tourists paused longer at the pier, their phones lowered, eyes lifted. And William? He never once spoke of what Chase Hargrove had done. He didn't need to, because Hargrove, without ever being asked, kept showing up. He helped paint the dockhouse, laid cables for electricity, and served sandwiches during youth classes. He said little, but each time he knelt to sweep the floor or adjust a support beam, he carried the weight of that day on the dock when his voice had been louder than his character. One morning, William walked up behind him, while he was sanding wood. You could have disappeared, William said. Why didn't you? Chase looked up, eyes tired but honest. Because I broke something I didn't even understand. Now I'm trying to build something I do. Word of William's story spread further. Not just among veterans, among teachers, journalists, grandchildren who watched the Navy's tribute and called their grandfathers for the first time in years. One day, a letter arrived, handwritten, from President Carter's grandson. My grandfather would have wanted to shake your hand. Thank you for reminding this country what quiet strength really looks like. Another came from a woman in Oregon. My dad never talked about the war. But after we watched your story, he finally cried. He finally talked. You gave me my father back. The Navy's Youth Maritime Program offered William a formal part-time role. He hesitated. He wasn't sure if he was ready to become a voice after so many years of being invisible. But then Benji, the boy who once thought old boats were useless, ran up to him after class and tugged his sleeve. Mr. Ashford, he asked, eyes wide, does the ocean ever forget you? William knelt beside him. The ocean forgets no one. It just waits until you're ready to come home. And so he accepted. Each week he taught seamanship, knots, and navigation. But more than that, he taught something missing in textbooks: dignity in silence, courage without applause, forgiveness without forgetting. The dockhouse walls were soon lined with photos, faded black and white shots of sailors in formation, letters from kids saying thank you, and drawings of Harlan's spirit in crayon. But none of it was framed. William insisted nothing here needs a frame, just memory. Then came the dedication day. The entire town gathered. Even those who once walked past him without a glance stood in the front row. A priest read the names of the 18 sailors William had saved. Each name echoed over the harbor like a drumbeat of remembrance. Rear Admiral Keller returned once more, not as an officer, but as a friend. He said only one sentence: "You are living proof that honor never expires." As the sun dipped low, painting the water with fire and forgiveness, William sat once more on the bench, Angela beside him, Benji at his feet, Chase standing in the background, quiet, still sanding wood. William looked out to the horizon where sea met sky and whispered, "She still sings to me." Angela leaned her head on his shoulder. "You finally got what you deserved," she said. But William shook his head. "No, I got more than that. I got remembered." Final words in his logbook that night, day 16, 8:36. Harlan's spirit sails again. But this time we carry more than fish. We carry every hand that helped rebuild her. We carry what war tried to steal worth. And for the first time, the sea called and the world listened. Moral ending and reflection. For viewers 60 plus, so many veterans live in silence, not asking for much, just respect. But too often, they are mocked, ignored, dismissed as relics until something breaks. And then we remember they were never just old. They were once everything we pray we could be under fire. This story wasn't just about a boat. It was about how a nation forgot a man and what happened when it finally remembered. If you believe silence doesn't mean weakness, if you believe service never expires, if you believe respect should never wait until a funeral, then share the story, pass it on, sit, remember, thank, and ask yourself who around you is still waiting to be seen.